To our regular session. I'll welcome you again to the regular session American Fork City Council meeting in September 24th, 2019. We appreciate you being here. We will follow the agenda as outlined. We will first stand and have a pledge of allegiance, after which the invocation will be given by Councilmember Carroll. After that, I will conduct the roll call. Would everybody please stand?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful this day to be able to meet here together. We're grateful for the country that Thou hast given to us to live and to grow. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy. Please bless us this night that we will have Thy Spirit with us as we speak and give opinions. Help us to be civil and understanding. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Okay, I'll now conduct the roll call. Councilmember Christiansen. Here. Councilmember Shelton. Here. Councilmember Barnes.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll. Here. Councilmember Taylor. Here. Okay, item number 2 is public comment period. We'd ask again that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. And I have one person that has in written form asked to come forward. Nick Sorensen, if you'd come forward. I know I said your name. Please say it again.
My name is Nick Sorensen, American Fork City resident. Don't really have a specific comment other than the agenda item that you'll be addressing on the Eddington Estates infrastructure. Just wanted to let you know we appreciate that coming before the council. We're here if you have questions as you deliberate about it. And we're ready and willing to contribute our part to make that happen. So thank you again for helping us to get to this point. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Anybody else who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period and we'll move on to the city administrator's report.
Mayor and Council, I just have a couple of items. Next Monday, the 30th of September, we will affectionately have what's called Bubble Day, and it's where we put the bubble up on the swimming pool. It's a fantastic opportunity to try something new if you want to come and help. The pool will be closed for 2 days while we do that, so just so the public knows that we will have that closed. Our neighbors in Lehigh and Pleasant Grove allow our patrons to come to their pools during that time, and when they have their pools down, we let them come to our pool. So it's a great friendship with the other neighbors. One other thing to announce, we will be having a open house at the fire station on October 10th from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And it's a great time for families to come and visit the fire department, learn what public safety services are available to our community. They have a lot of swag bags and things for kids to do, little hats and coloring books and things like that. So please plan on October 10th from 6 to 9 to bring your family to the fire department. That's all I have.
Thanks for that report. We'll now move on to council reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Christiansen.
Okay, during the summer, the library had its summer reading program and tried to simplify things to make things similar for children, teens, and adults, and then actually doubled the participation with more than 2,000 people participating. During that time, they served 5,655 lunches with the summer feeding program, which was with the Utah Food Bank. A lot of those were because Greenwood School was closed during the summer, where they gave lunches there. And they had a Harry Potter birthday party, and with over 1,000 people attending, and with good feedback. And currently, they're conducting a community assessment decide what people want from the library, what role they want them to provide. And they've been having focus groups, informing people what they do have to offer, and having new Spanish-speaking interns do the same, be able to reach more of the community. And planning to create a new mission statement, write a strategic plan, and look at future needs. And next year is going to be the 20-year anniversary. There's going to be a big party. So.
Thank you for that report. Councilmember Shelton.
Thanks, Mayor. As I mentioned in our meeting yesterday, we had our preliminary budget meeting with the North Point Solid Waste District, and they're looking at lowering a fee and raising a fee in that will affect the city, so I thought it'd be good to bring that up here. They are looking to adopt the final budget in their October meeting, so if there's questions you have, would love to chat about that. The item for raising of the fee would be on the public wanting to go dump garbage. So be residents taking garbage down there, that fee would increase to $11. The reason for it is right now there's a subsidy that's going from the other revenues to subsidize the residents, and they thought it'd be fairest to be able to have everyone accountable for their own use of the facility. And so with that, they would lower the curbside to the cities, and that will go down to $30.50. Just to give you an idea, most people say rates never go down in government. I'm happy to report that when our manager took over 16 years ago, the fee for curbside was $32.16. And so we've continued to see decreases over 16 years in the cost as we've been able to use economies of scales at that facility. What that will mean to the city is they ran projections is basically will be revenue neutral. We'll maybe save a few $1,000, but it just depends on how many people take trash because we have the voucher program. So that will now increase our cost as people utilize that voucher. But again, anyone have any questions, we're happy to take a look at it. Also in preparation, we're trying to decipher how to handle the large influx that will be green waste that will happen as Timpanogos winds down their projects. And then last but not least, we did enter into an agreement with Timpanogos Service District and with Bayview Landfill to start shipping sludge. If you know what sludge is, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, but it's a special ratio. You learn a lot at these board meetings, things you never thought you never need to know, but there's a special ratio of sludge to material, and that's about 60 tons a day is what we'll be limiting to hauling. Everything else will go out, so we are trying to partner in a way that is prudent for us, but also not overwhelming for the facility. That's all I have to report, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnes.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick items. Met with the Parks and Recreation Committee recently. They are continuing to work on how to connect and lay out some of the trails and suggestions for the bike paths as well as the walking trails and stuff. And they're more than willing to take ideas from anybody. The city does have a master plan that ultimately pretty well connects just about the whole city, I think, when it gets done. They are working towards that. But just like everything else in city government, there's never enough money. So we have to move slowly and work with the funds that are available and things, but we are trying to get that improved throughout the city. Second meeting was with Historic Preservation last week. There are some buildings that people want to build, and in order to build those, they are going to tear down some historic structures. Historic meaning old. That's all it takes to be historic, is to be old. Some of them have some significance, some of them have a little less significance. So in order to tear those down, it does require some steps to be taken through the city, and a couple of those are in the process right now, but no decision was made because they weren't finalized yet. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Carroll.
Yeah, I just have one tidbit to report, and that is that the chamber president and vice president told me that they are now the fastest growing chamber in the state. And I just want to give them kudos. And while they're doing that, they're trying to really focus on still providing value to the members that they have, in addition to any new members that are coming in.
Thanks for that report. Councilmember Taylor.
I have nothing to report, Mayor.
Okay, for the mayor's report, I had the privilege of going to a ribbon cutting on Saturday for Keystone Construction. It was kind of first of its kind for me, and that is that it was not necessarily a business with a storefront, but it was a development. And it's down in near the TOD by the Front Runner station. And everything that they have on the market is sold. They've sold into the second phase, and they're looking for a third phase. I mean, they're just literally filling them, so it's a great product. It was neat. It had 3 stories. No lawn to mow. I think that's maybe a reason that they're selling so fast, but it was really neat. I had the opportunity, and as did our city residents that were invited or who came, to join with the Community That Care program, where they were trained. And it's a wonderful thing that our community has started, thanks to this council, to provide resources for addiction, mostly preventative resources for young children, teenagers, and it provides just a really good network of people within the community with various backgrounds and interests that will come together and be directed on how to help. We had members from IHC there, the district in some executive positions, teachers, counselors, and it will come through and be facilitated through our police department and one of their employees. So it's a privilege to be there. And then last night I had the privilege of going to the high school and seeing our band perform for the very first time. And it performed on a beautiful new field. I came a little bit late. We had a meeting here at the city. I came early, I should say, 10 minutes early, and I could hardly find a place to park. It was as if the high school football team was playing. And I thought, only in American Fork does that happen, because it was just the whole one side was full of people. Now, I just want to share real quickly. They brought me into the middle of the field, and the teacher brought the kids all around us, and we talked to the kids just before it. I haven't felt that feeling in a long time, to be surrounded by so many kids. And I wanted to stress to them, I told them afterwards, that as they surrounded us, we surround them, and I really believe that. And not just the band, but all of our youth in this city. So that is the mayor's report. We will now move on to the common consent agenda, consisting of the 9 items that are before you. There have been some noted changes to the minutes, and they were corrected. So,
Mayor, I'd move approval of the common consent agenda.
have a motion by Councilman Taylor,
Second.
second by Councilmember Christiansen. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton, Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
All right, action items. Number 1 is the ratification of city payments from the date of September 3rd, 2019 to September 17th, 2019, and approval of purchase requests over $25,000. To have a motion to pay the city bills.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Barnes,
Second.
second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 2 is a review and action on appointment to the Cemetery and Beautification Committees as follows. Bruce Franson, Cemetery Committee reappointment. Maxine Still, Cemetery Committee reappointment. Alex Anderson, I'm going to ask if we could just, if when I announce your name, if you just please stand so that we can put a name to a face. I think I know him, but Alec Anderson, Cemetery Committee reappointment. Keith Hall, Cemetery Committee. Lily Hare, Cemetery Committee. Richard Hare, Cemetery Committee. Jeannie Cartwright, Beautification Committee. Thank you. Joanne Abel, Beautification Committee. Appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you. Have a motion to
Mayor, I'll make a
these appointments.
motion.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we approve the appointments to the new members and that we give a good thanks to, oh, they're not on there. I was thinking they were. Thanks to those who have, yeah, they're there. Thanks to those who have served for various reasons have had to leave those committees.
Thank you. If I could just take that motion and interject there, I failed to recognize, and I have through letter, but I think in a public meeting, Peggy Hansen, Therrell Curtis, Valerie Searle, excuse me. They were on the cemetery committee and on the beautification, Jeannie Cartwright. Okay, sorry. So, again, there's lots of committees that if somebody has a desire to serve our city, please come and talk to any one of the council members, and they will direct you. We need help. So, all right, I have a motion.
I'll make a second, Mayor.
A second by Councilmember Shelton.
Quick comment, as far as the beautification committee goes, I was very impressed. Got a phone call out of the blue yesterday morning, I think it was, and our two new committee members are already hard at work before even being appointed, and it's great to see the energy and excitement that they have, so look forward to working with them.
Councilman Shelton, I could have told you that before that, so. I have a motion and a second. And any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 3, review and action on a Class A beer license for Speedway LLC located at 655 South, 500 East. This is a business that we all know about. It's down by Taco Bell. It's just changed its ownership.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the Class A beer license for Speedway LLC located at 655 South, 500 East, American Fork, Utah.
Have a motion by Councilmember Shelton,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 4 is a review and action on approval of the Phelan addition consisting of 47.39 acres at approximately 400 East, 1700 South, including the ordinance of annexation, annexation agreement, and placement of the property in the I-1 industrial zone and the SP shoreline protection zone. Any question? We have the applicant here.
I have a small question. There was a note, this is the Phelan annexation, right? There was a note that a very, very small parcel was included in the annexation, and they didn't want a certain thing, but they're going to be included. How come they were included?
Adam, do you want to address that?
So, as far as the answer to that question goes, the city can include small pieces such as this into the annexation. However, we cannot exact right-of-way from that at this time.
Sure, yeah.
But the state law does allow that. It's just a small piece that helps close those gaps, and so we're bringing it
Close
in,
gaps, okay.
but we're not getting right-of-way at this time.
Okay, perfect.
And wasn't that their objection, is they just didn't want to give up that right of way? They weren't
I believe that
opposed-
was a portion,
The way I
part of it.
read the minutes, they weren't
Yeah.
opposed originally until they found out they might have to give up some right of way.
It's a difficult piece, I'll admit that,
Right.
but we're
But
bringing
isn't
it in
that
to
the
close
main
those
idea?
gaps.
Okay.
And I'll just confirm that's the case. This is a forced annexation where we're bringing them in so as to not leave an island just of county surrounded by city property.
Okay.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I move to adopt the ordinance approving the Phelan addition consisting of 47.39 acres at approximately 400 East, 1700 South as presented, with placement of the property in the I-1 and SP zones.
I have a motion by Councilmember Carroll and a second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Number 5, review and action on an agreement accepting infrastructure in the Eddington's Estate subdivision. I'm going to call Scott up, review this, and Nick, stay close.
Mr. Mayor, what we have before you, this is an item that I know we've discussed a couple of times with the council, including in a work session. The task that you gave to me was to go back and to do an assessment of the findings of the status of the infrastructure that's being requested to be accepted by the city. So I have done that and included that as a report that contains my findings. That is one of the attachments that you see before you tonight. I took a draft report that I'd done a couple of weeks ago and met with the representatives of the HOA, discussed it extensively with them, shared it with them to make sure that they understood what was in there. I didn't want there to be any surprises, so that we would have the opportunity to discuss. Very good that I had that meeting because they were able to clarify a couple of things for me that I had misunderstood, both ways and things that I thought they were asking for us to accept that they weren't, and things that I didn't think they were asking us to accept that they in fact were asking us to. And so it was very helpful, terrific meeting, very, very good for me to understand exactly what they were looking for, and for me to share with them my findings so that we could discuss them. So the report is with you. It's 15 pages, but it's mostly pictures of just a few of examples of some of the things that I found through there. We also discussed that if all of to discuss the need to have a cost associated with all of these findings, that if they were to be repaired and to be brought up to city standard, what would that cost? So I worked with Eric on our roads crew to be able to go get some quotes. So those costs are also included in the packet for your discussion, along with the letter formally requesting from them that this be accepted, and a draft agreement by which the city could agree to accept the infrastructure. So with that, I'd probably stand for any questions that you have regarding the report, the findings, any other questions or concerns that I could answer.
Jump in here, Scott, real quick. I noticed in the picture that Venlon just had up there, they had these visitor parking stalls, I'm missing what I'm going to call them, and we talked about, I think there were some issues with snow removal and who's going to be in charge of that. Did we come to a resolution on that?
So the HOA has requested, that was one thing that I asked for clarification, and I think in the report, if I remember right, I included that the HOA has asked that we take over the maintenance of those areas as well, for pavement maintenance as well as snow removal.
Okay. The only question that I have, I'm not so concerned about pavement maintenance, because I think if they're in there doing a treatment, it's not going to be that much more to put that on there. I don't know. I'd rely on your expertise.
Probably not. I would agree with that.
Snow removal is a different story because time is money there, and you're trying, heavy snowstorm, you're trying to be as efficient as we can, and we had that snow removal plan that we have for the city. My understanding, this would be the lower priority area on that plan.
In general, the individual residence streets do take the lowest priority. We try to hit arterials, collectors, really the heavy traffic roads first. That's
Right.
the general way the plan is laid out. Cul-de-sacs quite often hit dead last. But we try to hit them all
Right.
eventually, so
And
it would
then-
be a lower priority.
The other question I had is that done by the smaller trucks with the blades, or is it just a hodgepodge of whoever's available is going out there and doing this?
It depends on it's really whatever we can get. In an area like this, those parking areas would pretty much have to be a
That's-
small truck with
that was my
a blade.
worry.
It
That's
would
what I
have to
like
be.
on
Rob, I
there.
had the same concern, like
Yeah.
having to bring another car or truck just for a really small area for snow removal there seems so inefficient.
So I'm almost okay to say, hey, those parking areas, no other neighborhood has that as a typical city, right? HOAs do have that. But in front of my house, poor Stacy gets to see me have to have neighbors that park, come visit me, park at the neighbor's street up above in front of their home. And so I wouldn't have any problem not doing the snow removal, letting the sun naturally take care of that. And if someone felt like they wanted to have a party at their house or needed that, they're welcome to grab a snow shovel or a well, I hate to say four-wheeler because the city probably wouldn't be much in favor of that. But anyway.
See, people that come to see me park elsewhere too, but mostly because they just don't want to get seen coming to my house. So.
Gotcha.
Well, there's also the situation where if there's a snowstorm, we're not supposed to be parking on the street, which is the part that would be cleared. So how do you justify that? It's a parking area, but you're taking care of it like a street. That doesn't make sense to me either.
So
Good questions. I don't really have answers. I think it's depending on what the will of the council is, what we do there.
So tell me about these drive approaches. I was trying to think, how are we just ripping it out and making it a different slope to be ADA compliant? Are we going out into the right of way? What are we doing there?
It would be ripping it out and widening the driveway, and the drive approach itself would have to be a little bit steeper. So that's a general discussion that if the council wants to do that, and as you probably see from the cost, that's actually over half of the cost that's in there
That's what I was trying to
those
understand.
work.
So the only difference is it'll just be, instead of kind of a cut, a more steep, and then kind of sidewalk, and then the driveway, you're just looking to make it all one slope all the way
No,
through?
it would probably still need to be a sloping down from the driveway, then a more level spot of the sidewalk, and then a steeper between the edge of the sidewalk and the curb. It would have to be a little bit of a case-by-case basis. I hate to say there probably is no one-size-fits-all. We'd have to look at each driveway individually, but if to comply with the ADA and have 4 feet of width with the proper slope, not too much of a slope, it's quite a bit of ripping out and replacing.
The only thing I could see there is a rolled curb.
And that may be
I mean,
the
that's
other
only thing I
option
could
as
see
well.
Fitting is a rolled
That
curb
may be-
there. I don't know if that's exactly what people would want to have in front of their homes, is a rolled.
Not sure either. And so, admittedly, this didn't go in and make a full design as part of this with each report. So there are a couple of different options that could be done. What I asked Eric to do was, when he went and got a quote, was to look as if you had to rip out each one and if you had to report the way I described it, what would it cost?
Okay.
There may be other cheaper options. I don't know. We don't have costs on that, and didn't go through any in-depth survey or design on any of them.
Great picture with the tape measure. I just look at that where the 4-foot mark is at, and I'm like, how do you even put a drive approach?
It would be tough. It would be tough.
So, okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the land drain system, and you're recommending we exclude that, right?
The land drain system is something that is in there that I had not considered, but understand from the HOA that they did want us to accept that. The land drain system, and I'm sure probably most of you know, but just for the audience generally, it's areas where there are high groundwater. A lot of developers will put in land drain systems where essentially there's a couple of different ways to do it, but a lot of it is essentially perforated pipe. It's a ribbed pipe. It's not usually a solid wall pipe, but it's a ribbed pipe that is down into the groundwater, again perforated, with a slope on it, so that, and filter fabric. Usually they'll put a little gravel around the edge of the filter fabric. So when the groundwater migrates into that, it'll hit that pipe, go down longitudinally in the pipe, where from each house it'll all connect to a common pipe in the street. Usually that pipe is also perforated so that it can accept groundwater that would be flowing into it, and then that drains down to, in this case, a common point where it's a manhole kind of in the southeast corner of the subdivision. The difficulties with land drains, with maintenance, and this is for whoever is maintaining it, is first of all knowing the location, the condition of it. In all cases with developments that are happening now and generally in the past, with one exception that may get mentioned tonight, is they're private infrastructure and they remain private infrastructure, not maintained by the city. So we don't inspect it. We haven't inspected them. We don't have specifications on them. They're just really installed, usually again up by the house, then it comes out into the street. One of the challenges with maintaining them is that almost without exception, the thing that'll plug a land drain system is a tree root. It's usually not debris or like other things that go into sanitary sewer that, for Councilman Barnes' sake, I won't get into tonight what those things are, but the things that plug a sanitary sewer, usually you never find anything like that in a land drain. But you find a lot of tree roots, a lot of them. And they love to get in there, especially where there's constant water flowing. And so those are difficult to cut. We do have the tools as a city to cut a tree root, but the unfortunate part is that it's extremely likely, in fact, I would say almost certain, that in cutting roots with the tools that we have, we're going to be damaging the pipe too. It would probably shatter the pipe, certainly damage it significantly. So they're difficult, and so my recommendation is that we don't take that on as the city, the liability that would be associated if a tree root got in there, plugged it, for some reason we weren't able to get it, didn't maintain it, and it ended up backing up. I'm concerned about that, especially for something that we didn't have a specification on and didn't inspect.
Is that what some of us old timers call French drains? It sure sounds like a French drain.
It is. And so I'm really looking at the system, French drain,
whatever you call
land
it,
drain,
it's
it's effectively the same thing. They serve the same purpose.
So I guess I have two questions. The cost, who's going to pay the cost? The $78,000 or whatever the number is, to do all of this. And the second question relates to the first. Is the applicant willing to accept some of these, or not some of these, all of these notes and things that you've made as far as the drain and the water collecting and all of that stuff? So I guess that question's for them.
I'll probably
or
ask.
you can answer it either
maybe
way.
Talk a little bit about the second question first. Is again, this report really is my findings. So this is my professional opinion for what I see and what I think is appropriate for fixing, doing work that would bring it up to city standard as if this was a new or relatively new subdivision. I did. I did. And they probably would have a little bit of a difference of opinion on a couple of things, and I respect that difference of opinion on a few things. In terms of who would pay for it, the first question you asked, really it's up to the council, which, if the council's will is to accept this subdivision infrastructure generally for city maintenance, then whatever items you want to accept, and depending on what you decide tonight, we would accept for maintenance, and whichever items you want to require as a condition of that acceptance, it's really up to you. For the practical mechanics of it, one of the things that the HOA representatives I spoke with suggested that I thought was a really good idea and support is that rather than them going out and contracting with these people and contacting them, that we do that and essentially just track those costs. We again have quotes here which is to the best of our ability. It may not be to the penny, but it's going to be very, very, very close to that. And essentially then they would pay that bill for those contracted items. I support that. It's true that, I mean, that's what we do for a living and work with contractors, so.
So based on that, if this were a new subdivision, the city would be paying for the signs, correct? We would be installing stop signs or street signs or whatever?
No,
or does
generally the developer would be.
Okay.
The developer would be putting up those signs for a new subdivision.
Okay.
Council, where do you want to go with this?
So I'm
thought-
okay with Scott's recommendation of excluding the land drain system. I wonder, do you want to speak? That's up to
Come on
the
up,
mayor,
Nick.
but
So we did have a great meeting. We appreciate Scott's help in that meeting. We did discuss a few concerns, so maybe I could just run through a few of those. So one of them, just on the land drain note, that's not going to be a deal breaker for us. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to exclude one part of the whole thing. The whole premise of it was
get rid
the
of
residents in the neighborhood are not going to do as good a job, and are probably going to mess something else up if we have to fix the land drain. So the city's probably going to do a potentially better job, especially if there's city pipes and city sewers that we're going to hit while we're doing it as well. So that was kind of a discussion we had around that. And Scott had in his report at a minimum, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, Scott, but he has a note in there that says, at a minimum, I'd recommend accepting it up to the property line and not going onto the property line. Did I get that correct?
That was the original draft, and I can speak.
Oh, okay. So maybe that got taken out, but we felt like that seemed like a fair concept because that's what we're doing with the sewer and all the other stuff. That's not a major issue to us. The ADA thing, I know we had an extensive discussion on that in the last work session. And if you remember, there were a lot of comments around, there's a lot of out of ADA compliance things around the city. We would not be able to move forward with the proposal as it stands because of costs. So if we were going to have to pay for all of that, it would just die, which would be sad. One of the other things that was in there that feels like the spirit of this is trying to get the roads to the point where they're in good enough condition. And the previous report showed they had a good road surface life, that all that was looking good. And we proposed that we could pay for a overlay treatment. In the bid, it was, and I'm not an expert on this, so somebody else can speak to this, but it called out a specific product, an HA5. And we got bids previously on products that were comparable to that, but that cost about half as much as that, have a similar kind of thing. So that would be something we would ask for consideration if it was to go to that point. It seems like there are other products, and that's a certain type of product, but we can get a similar result for potentially different costs. Scott can talk to that. But we're certainly willing to do that, and the crack seal, we're open to that as well. It seems like a few of these other items, the sidewalk issues, a few trailer hitch, holes in the road and things that are kind of common among roads that are 4 years old, don't have a massive impact on this from a city perspective. So we would appreciate consideration on a few of those items. But that's kind of the conversation we had with Scott about that. I can answer any questions you have from that. Did I miss anything?
I just also want to
Will
add.
you just state your name?
Yeah, Matt Thomas.
Thank you.
I'm the president of the HOA currently. Nick was the former. In regards to the ADA thing, our development is only 4 years old. Who inspects those compliance? I mean, is that something the builder has to be? Are they required to adhere to some sort of standard? And why weren't they adhering to that with our development being only 4 years old?
Because you're an HOA,
Oh, is that why?
so it got you out of it.
Okay. Yeah, that was my big concern. I mean, yeah.
If we had a chance to vote for that, we would have voted against that. Like most of the things that we're talking about tonight. Yeah, that makes sense.
So-
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so it feels like from our perspective, there's a middle ground in that $10,000 to $20,000 worth of things we could do to make this work from our perspective, at which it would work, and we would be able to improve the roads from where they're at today, turn them over in great condition, and then the other items can be figured out. But that's kind of from our perspective where it stands.
So, Scott, how would you repair those divots? Are you just going to go throw some asphalt down? I mean, those are
So for the
the trailer hitches. I
divots,
understand the
for a lack of a
I
better
understand
word.
the trenches and things of that nature, a little bit bigger. But
So depending on how bad it is, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Some of them are probably, an HA5 treatment would cover it. It would be fine. It would last. Some of them probably need, they're deep enough, bad enough. Some of the issues that you'd need to cut out a little bit of piece and put some new pavement
I almost
on.
wonder, does cutting it defeat the purpose?
It's a risk. It can make you then have a cut, but if it's done well and done right, it'll improve it. It's better than a big pothole, which these aren't to that stage yet, but they could get there, some of them.
Aren't we kind of straining at a gnat, though? I mean, if we're looking at the crippler for this is all the concrete work. You know,
Well,
they
I'm just looking at
have.
what we're gonna require of them when they come in. I agree with you. I'm not in favor of requiring the concrete work. It's not where I'm at. I'm not in favor of the storm drain, taking that on board, as we've already discussed. So I think it just really comes down to the last items on there, which are the asphalt items, and just trying to say, what are we going to require on that list?
And so, Scott, with that, what the HOA had presented to them in terms of a HA5, is that what we're calling it, with an H?
That's what we're calling it. It's like a brand name like Kleenex versus
Right.
tissue. It's high density mineral bond is the
Right.
generic name for
And
an
so
HA5.
what they had presented to them, is it truly not the equivalent? Would it not hold up as well? What would be the problem with going with the estimate that they received for that as opposed to this higher?
I wish I
piece
could
now?
remember exactly what treatment that was that they received, and I'm sorry I don't have that with me.
Is the
And who that
HA5
quote
the
was.
really heavy overlay, turn the road
It's what we
dark,
just did
or
on
is it-
7th East, like 3 years ago.
That's what I
right?
thought it was. It's not the mixing of the concrete.
No.
So
No,
I would be
it's-
opposed
Do you want to just maybe come up here and
Yeah, it's,
say what it is, Nick?
Yeah, so we had 3 different ones, and they called it a,
is it a fog seal
uh,
or?
let's see here. Talking about a heavier aggregate sand in it and requires more square footage. The sales guy said it's comparable to HA5. So I think as we read through this, so they've got a commercial grade product here for $8,000 and then a premium grade with HA5, which is literally double. If you want this is the contractor. If you want my honest opinion, there's not much difference. I've been doing this for 12 years, and one of the companies I first started using the premium products, and I haven't seen a huge difference in the life of it compared to a traditional commercial grade seal coat. I personally would not spend the extra money on my own properties. This is a guy trying to sell us. They work better.
Now
for,
us, huh, Nick?
They work better for high traffic roads and higher speed roads. That's where you'd get your money's worth. But HOA roads and commercial parking lots last about the same amount of time. So that it wasn't a hard line, but it just felt like we're paying for the Kleenex as opposed to the tissue.
And I'm not really sure again what product that is. I don't know. It is a general rule of thumb. You do get what you pay for. So
Not
there
always.
are
I got it right here. So
there are lesser
it's a
treatments.
seal coat, power clean asphalt surface
Okay.
with high pressurized blowers. Apply a tough coat asphalt emulsion sealer.
Okay.
Nick,
So
How
that's a good product.
how old are those quotes that you
They're
have?
about 6 months.
Okay.
That is
So
a good
would
product.
that be equivalent? Would that be enough for us to be able to, I mean, would that pass muster, for lack of a better term?
It's one of those things, it's a range. Would it greatly improve the road? Absolutely. Would it improve it as much as a HA5 $13,000 treatment? No, it wouldn't. So
Would it come to the point where they needed to be included and we could get this through for them?
I'm sorry.
Would it come to the point where we could then take over this and make this a serious, the goal of this from the beginning? So if they were
Sure.
able to put that and meet the other needs that were on here, would that meet the requirement for us to be able to say, okay, they're no longer an HOA, they're in the responsibility of the city?
I think it would. It wouldn't. Again, it's how much money we want to spend. It would not last as long as the higher quality treatment, but would it greatly improve the quality of the road? And I'm not trying to dodge your question, Councilman, but it's really depends on how much extra life we want to buy out of this thing, and that's dependent on so many factors that it would improve it. It's really it's a matter of subjectivity. Is would it be good enough for us to accept? Of course, we could accept it with whatever treatment
Right, but
you felt was appropriate.
we're setting that standard.
Sure.
And so what I'm asking is, what is that? Is that just by the council saying, okay, we'll accept the $8,000 treatment, and what do we need to get to? We're not going to do anything that's to the detriment of the city,
Sure.
but we want to be able to have a logical go forward for these folks. If they don't need an HA5, it would be nice to have an HA5, but if they don't need it, and the treatment they have for their low-traffic roads would work, why couldn't we accept that?
And we could, and we absolutely could. It would bring it up. None of these treatments at all would bring it up to the status of a brand-new pavement. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's one extreme, but I'm trying to illustrate with extremes. And if we did nothing, we could still even accept that. But we would just know that these other treatments, then we would need to do sooner rather than later. It would need some more investment at some point. So it's really whatever level you, the council, are comfortable with, I can accept, and we'll just work through and put it as appropriate in the road plan as to when it'll need its next treatment.
Clark, I look at it and say,
So-
you know what, just put it as if it was a normal road that we had. And we were doing HA5 on all the 3-4-year-old roads, right, like 700 East. So I think it meets the standard that we're currently requiring. I'm hoping that the $67,000 that we're saving them on the HOA side of things is kind of that compromise that Nick was talking about.
The HOA, the ADA?
I'm sorry.
You mean
Well,
the ADA?
Yeah, the ADA stuff, sorry. Too many acronyms tonight.
There's a lot of acronyms, and we've got more to come.
Oh, boy. So anyway, that's where I think I would look at it. That way it doesn't look like anyone's getting any special deal. It's just fitting right in with our typical road plan treatment that we offer.
And so for the standpoint of Eddington Estates, in getting this taken care of for you guys, as we eliminate the ADA requirement and tearing out all of that concrete, would you be willing to go to the same standard that we set for cities now with the HA5?
Yeah, I think so. I think the other question I had, and Scott, you addressed this in the email chain, but I still don't get it, was this 5,200 for asphalt remove and replace. And I understand there was a curve in our neighborhood where garbage trucks had done something. Can you explain what that, because that 5,000 might push us to the point where it's not possible, but yes, the HA5 is fine, I think, pending that this asphalt. And I don't know if that was related to that.
If you look at all of that asphalt, that line item in the estimate is a combination of all the locations where we feel the asphalt needs to be removed and replaced. So that's a sum of, there's a couple of places where the trailer hitches were, there's a couple, at least that's what we think it looks like. There's a trench that is really kind of strange, or it looks like it was a trench, I'm not sure what it was, but somewhere near the north entrance to the subdivision, there's a part where the asphalt looks like it's failed. There is a part where it's been pushed up. When you add all of those things up where we're recommending they be cut out and replaced with new, that's about 1,000 square feet of asphalt, roughly $5 a square foot, and that's where that 5,000 comes from. So it's just it's a some catch-all.
You mentioned the HA5 could cover some of those?
That would be the areas that we recommend be cut out and replaced, is that 1,050 square feet. So, the other places where the asphalt might have a few little dings and nicks that are not included in that an HA5 or an overlay would probably be good enough to, again, it won't make it brand new, but it's
Right.
makes
Well,
it good.
the fact is that 75% of the area in American Fork would love the roads that are inside of the Eddington Estates. So,
That is true. It's true.
okay, 85.
Little low, yeah.
So that would get you folks to about an additional investment of $20,000. Are you okay with that? I think if we could, I think they've set a very high bar for anyone that wants to come in and do the same thing. And I don't know. I feel like we're good to go with this if we can make those exceptions as noted by removing the concrete removal and the concrete replace, and then we could go forward with that as it exists. So I'll go back up to where the motion is, and I'll take a shot at trying to Get down faster than Bendlin.
It's a long report.
Race is on.
And the race is on. Never mind, Bendlin, I've got it. Okay. So I will attend this. I move to accept the dedication of the following infrastructure components in the Eddington Estates after the recommended repairs are made.
We'll take that.
Yeah, well, removing the concrete removal and concrete replace. The water isn't on there, so that's not an issue. So removing those two items of the concrete removal and the concrete replace, I move that I recommend this repairs be made. Move to accept the dedication. Sorry. Too many computers I'm looking at here going back and forth. So
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor.
shoddy motion, but it is a motion.
Could we maybe just add in there the clarification of the snow removal? I think that'd just be a good point that we take a look at. That way,
I'm not hung up on the snow removal so much on that additional parking that keeps cars off the road. I know we don't have another spot like that exactly in American Fork. My road seldom gets done, so I understand how those are. But if we've got, we used to back in the day, the cemetery truck would go out with a blade and get some of those small cul-de-sacs and areas. I'm not hung up by that because I like the cars being off the road myself. But that doesn't bother me enough to put that in the motion. If you all feel strong about it, then you can deny my motion or vote it down. But that's where I am with that.
Question on the motion. Are we saying we want this HO5, or are we
Yes.
saying the equivalent is okay?
No, we're saying we're going with the recommendations that Scott has
It has
provided
to
in
be
this
that particular
document,
one.
with the
Okay.
exception of concrete removal and concrete replace.
I'll second the motion then.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor and a second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 6, review and action on land use map amendment from the residential low density to the professional office designation located at 1254 East, 300 North. Any questions for Adam on this?
We keep seeing changes around this area. Is there a general plan? Is it like everything south, 300 South is changing?
Yeah, so what you're
'Cause there are
seeing.
houses there right
Yeah,
now,
what you're
right?
seeing is as properties are coming in either into the city with annexation, in that vicinity, the Planning Commission has kind of drawn a line where anything south of 300 South, they will,
300
or
north.
sorry, 300 North, they will support that going to professional office. And so as the property owners are requesting that, they're recommending that to move forward.
Well, it's weird because when you look at the plan that's on there, all those are cutting their lots in half.
That's how it
Yeah.
was years ago.
Right,
And
so-
so as the hospitals expanded, they're seeing that
I look
value.
at that as saying, hey, we're kind of cleaning this up like we have in other areas.
Okay.
Yeah, and this isn't the most up-to-date. The land use map, we've got a more up-to-date version, but you'd see more of that in the purple, so.
I think I'd like to make a motion, and I move to adopt the resolution approving a land use map amendment from the residential low density to the professional office designation located at 1254 East, 300 North.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Barnes,
Second.
second by Councilmember Christiansen. Any discussion on the motion?
Just one more question I had. If we're looking at changing that whole area, would it make sense just to do it now?
Yeah, we'll take forward to the planning commission the remainder of the properties, and so that should be forthcoming.
Okay.
Do you need the landowner's permission to do that? That's a question I've had. Can't we just do it all at once, even without their permission?
You couldn't do it tonight because it wasn't.
Well, I understand, not tonight,
Yes.
but we could do it all at
As a
once.
city-initiated land use map amendment, then yes.
We could do that all at once through the planning commission and the normal steps.
Okay. A motion is second. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye. Hey, Mayor, can I say one thing?
Sure.
I just want to make note, when I said my cul-de-sac seldom gets done. I was one of those people in the cemetery truck going that around and pushing snow. I wasn't saying my cul-de-sac seldom gets done. I just wanted people to know that those smaller streets, you know, they don't get the attention, nor should they, as the main thoroughfares. I wasn't taking a shot at anyone for that.
Well, I was in there too, and I thought you were taking a shot at it. So, okay, items number 7 and 8 have been pulled by the petitioner.
Just said it's 7 and 8.
Wait, 7?
Excuse me, Adam, did we talk in key staff 7 and 8?
Yes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another
Yeah. Yeah, that was John Heiner. Okay, item number 9, review and action on an ordinance approving a zone map amendment from the RA1 residential agriculture to the R1 9000 residential zone located at 665 West, 750 North. Any questions? I'd have Adam address this, and John, if he doesn't leave. I'm just kidding, John. Way to call him out. Okay.
Mayor, I'll make a
Hang on.
motion to adopt the ordinance approving the zone map amendment from the RA1 residential agricultural zone to the R1 9000 residential zone located at 665 West, 750 North.
Have a motion by
Second.
Councilmember Shelton, second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 10 is review and action on an ordinance adopting an amendment to section 17.7.501.e-1 little a of the American Fork City Development Code relating to the minimal project area in a single-family cluster PUD project. Boy, that get my tongue twisted
I
there.
told you we were getting into a bunch
Boy.
of those later on.
Yeah.
I'll just give you a brief background on this. This kind of goes hand in hand with the one you just looked at previously. The zone change was to bring the property into one zone as opposed to a split zone.
Wait, I
And
think that was.
from the RA1 to the R19. And so this is the same petitioner, what they would like to do if this passes is they would come forward with a PUD proposal with a flexible lot design in order to preserve some of that landscaped area. They would like to incorporate that into a subdivision. The way the code is currently written is the PUD for that zone needs a minimum of 5 acres. They have 4. So it's really dependent on the property. There are few properties that this would affect, at least in the northern portion of the city. This similar density is found on the south side of the city, but under a different zone, under a PR3. And so that was discussed a little bit at the Planning Commission. It did move forward with a recommendation of approval, although there were 2 votes in the negative from the Planning Commission, but overall it was a positive recommendation moving forward. So again, they kind of go hand in hand. Just simple explanation, they just want to change that minimum size requirement from 5 to 4.
Question, maybe 2 of them, I guess. I don't remember seeing any reason why those 2 votes were against it. That's not a hang-up. How did we come up with the 5? Is it just because 5's a good number? Is there some
I don't know that there was any
logic
magic number with that.
or
It's
anything?
just
Just
if
a
you
number, right?
Yeah, the PUD options for lot sizes larger than R19 are larger, and then in the R2, R3, and R4, they are at the 4 acres. So you go from 10, and then R19 was 5, and then
that's just
everything else
based
is
on the
4.
size of each individual property.
Yeah,
is kind of
basically
the way
like a
that works,
base.
isn't it?
You know,
Right.
before you can do that type of project, you need that much
You
land.
need that much land.
And so they're asking that this be changed from 5 to 4. The density does not change. All of the other provisions do not change. It's just that minimum size requirement.
All right, council, what do you think?
I'm happy with it.
I'm happy to make a motion. I move to approve the ordinance adopting an amendment to section 17.7.501.E.1a of the American Fork City Development Code relating to the minimum project area and single-family cluster PUD projects.
Okay, have a motion by Councilmember Carroll,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item 11A, review and action on an ordinance approving a district framework plan for the Castlewood TOD project located at 900 West, 200 South, the TOD Transit-Oriented Development Zone.
If I could just give a little background on this. This initial district framework plan was tabled by the Planning Commission in June. The reason for that was at the time they were requesting a code text amendment, which was withdrawn before it was heard by the City Council. They went back and reworked the district framework plan. They did not need that code text amendment, and so they've been able to bring this forward, which actually does meet what we're looking for in that TOD area, and they're meeting the requirements of what a district framework plan is in the code. And so with that, we were happy to recommend approval to the Planning Commission.
Was this the one that basically had that road that didn't go all the way through?
Correct.
Is that the one?
Yeah.
It's the same
Yes.
one, right? That's what I thought.
So, Adam, I'm just curious. It seems like sometimes we set the code, and it's good to get it tested by, you know, the market out there and what's going on. But sometimes I wonder, at what point do you keep changing code to be able to meet the parameters of the developer? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Feels like this
in the
was-
end, it wasn't changed. So the code was not changed.
Okay.
They withdrew their application
So
for
this
that.
isn't doing any change.
No.
We're just adopting the district framework plan.
Yep.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood
As
when
it
I read
is.
that through. I
Yeah.
apologize. Thank you.
Is there any concern about that the road going south there? I don't remember what road it goes onto. Is it a neighborhood
I believe it's
collector?
350.
It goes into a neighborhood collector. It's very close in the middle of the block there. Is there any concern there?
No, engineering was recommended approval of that. This initial road layout, they seemed okay with as far as, you know, where it, you know, was laid in theory on the ground, and they felt that they could make that work.
Okay. Are there other interior roads that are perhaps going to be in the in this, or is this the only road?
This would be the only one. So we've
Okay.
seen some conceptual plans, and so everything would kind of come off of this. That would be kind of a rear access. And so
Okay.
you're going to have buildings pushed up against all of those roads, 200 south, the road on the west, and then the property on the east, that will act as kind of a greenway, pedestrian way going directly towards the station. So there,
That's not a road at all?
no, that's not a road on the
Okay.
east. That will, that's the Brad Reynolds project.
Okay.
And so there's apartment buildings there right now. And so what they're doing is looking at that, how can they incorporate that and still make it better, if you
Yeah.
will. So,
To me, this isn't maybe the most optimal for connectivity because the road doesn't, you know, if you live maybe in that curve to get over, to walk, you would have to go kind of down and around or up and around.
it's really not that big of an area. Maybe it's a little misleading on the
Well,
pictures.
What I was going at is even if there were like a pedestrian access through some of that, I don't
And,
even
and
know
there
if
will be. So conceptual plans show that.
Okay.
Again, there's the one on the east and then the interior, because we do want all of the buildings out to the road in this
Yes,
TOD.
absolutely.
That's what this allows for. So you don't have any parking in the front. Everything's in the back. The buildings are taller than they initially were going to be. So that, again, that helps.
Sure. I mean, just like normally you're looking for a grid when you're looking for
Yeah,
connectivity.
and this is just a small piece of the larger grid. So,
Sure, but you don't have any connectivity from east to west at all through the entire parcel.
Oh, on the east, it's developed, so there's no opportunity to punch through to the east as far as a road is concerned. But there will be that pedestrian and bike element on the east side going north to south.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I just maybe add one thing? I don't, not to jump too far ahead on the agenda, but one of the items before you later on the agenda is an amendment to the operational overlay of the TOD. And one of the things that we'll show you when we get to that item is that the rest of the lines that you see up there, we're proposing would change substantially based on what we're really seeing in the field. And I think it would show kind of some more connectivity than what you see from if you just look at that.
Well, I know
So-
I'm sounding like a broken record, and I'm going to keep harping on it every time because that's honestly one of the things that's going to make the TOD different than other places in the city, is being able to be connected, both the cars, the roads, but also pedestrian accesses through different areas.
Absolutely.
So I'm just looking for different ways that if pedestrians have to walk farther around to go to a neighbor that actually lives behind them, that maybe isn't the best use of connectivity. So, and I agree with you, it's a little bit different knowing that the parcel to the east was done under a different code.
It was.
But all I can do is warn you, I'm going to keep asking.
And Councilman, I hope you don't think, those are great questions and support that, and I'm hoping that, again, we'll be able to kind of show you a little bit later tonight how that we're looking out for the exact same thing, because feel just as strongly as you do on that issue. And Councilwoman Christiansen, we did look at the spacing on that, and it's close, but it's within standard.
Okay, would you like to add anything? Good? I'd love to. Well, you came up front so fast, I just thought, come on up.
Okay, Mike Hathorn with Community One, representing Castlewood Development on this. Just to add some more clarity to your questions in regards to the parcel, I think it's, Adam pointed out that we're looking at a parcel that's
Smaller than it appears.
yes, and it's a bit of a challenging piece. This was something in terms of the operational overlay that's in the code that kind of slipped through the process in terms of the makeup of the block itself. If you'll recall, the transit core requires block sizes of 4 to 8 acres. This block is actually over 8 acres. It was almost 9.5 acres. And so there was a bit of a challenge in terms of what we do with that, because the operational overlay shows it as a 9.49 acre block. And as we worked with it, we came to and this was part of the problem that the developer actually had initially, in terms of coming forward with something, not understanding some of the sequencing issues that exist in terms of the code itself. So after working with it, we determined that we could pull in a public road, and so that we met the block size requirement. So that was the first issue. You asked a question about whether other roads might come in. Based on the size of it, it's somewhat problematic, but the answer to your question is actually yes. But the detail for that is set at the next level with the block plan. Okay. The reason we didn't show it here, again, being a sequencing issue, is if we show the other road, the road that you had seen previously in their work prior, that showed as a cul-de-sac, which actually wasn't a cul-de-sac, but they were demonstrating it incorrectly. If we show that road at this point, we then have 2 blocks that are 2 acres. So from a sequencing standpoint, what actually is going to be happening is, and I'm speaking specifically.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Is that helping?
Yes,
so
it is.
there's that issue, and then the issue of the pedestrian access. One of the things that's actually very important in this particular development project is that there's both north-south pedestrian connectivity, which the roads actually allow for outside of the block, and then the greenway, the linear park that's running along the east side. But there's actually really good connectivity through this block that will allow someone to cross-navigate it to get to that greenway.
Okay.
So you're going to have exactly what it is that you're asking for. What's important to understand is that the sequencing that the code requires doesn't necessarily give you some of those details until later in the process, But that's by design so that we're making decisions when we have a set of facts that allows us to make those decisions at appropriate time. If that helps.
Thank you very much.
You're
Mayor, I'm
welcome.
ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to adopt the ordinance approving a district-friendly plan for the Castlewood TOD project located at 900 West, 200 South.
Have a-
Yeah, 200 South.
Have a motion by Councilmember Taylor and second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion?
Councilmember Shelton made that motion.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Shelton. So Councilmember Shelton with the motion, second by Councilmember Barnes, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Item number 12 is review and action on a resolution authorizing American Fork City to execute a service agreement with Light Hub Communications. We've had extensive work in studying this document. I believe everybody has a final copy of what we had from our last work session. If there's any questions, we have legal counsel here. David's pretty good at this.
I think it's important to note, Mayor, that because of the public hearing and different things tonight, that agreeing to this service agreement with Light Hub in no way binds the city to go for the fiber agreement or any of those things. So just to be clear on that, it's just simply keeping the wheels moving and keeping our opportunities open.
Okay. I would accept a motion from that response if everybody's comfortable.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the resolution offering the mayor to execute a service agreement with Light Hub Communications.
Have a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
Second.
second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion?
Sorry, Mayor, I did have some discussion. As I went through and looked at it, when we got it at 5:30, I just wanted some clarification on some of the items we had inside here. It still references a loan, and I thought we got rid of that and agreed to get rid of that provision.
References a what? I'm sorry.
The loan
promissory
provision,
note?
the promissory note, so it's still in there. It's less clear, so 3.6 is the section that's in there. And so I thought we said, hey, if Light Hub is short revenues, we're not guaranteeing a loan to Light Hub. We're going to come back, and Light Hub's got to come talk to us. And I think the term we used was trimming the fat on the operational side.
It does say promissory note in this one.
And so it's entangled in that whole 3.6 section. So that's a concern to me. Also, in 3.6 at the very end, I would like some clarification, unless we're going to change it. It says that they'll be solely paid back from service fees. I would say that Light Hub has an obligation to pay that back from any revenue source they have available as soon as possible, if we are going to keep the promissory note provision in there. And it says that it's going to be subordinate to other payment obligations. I would hope it only be subordinate to the bond, not to any other item that's out there. Only be to the debt that we're taking on for the project. The other item that I noticed inside there was on section, let's see, 5.15, talking about amendments. Just says this service contract shall not be substantially modified, otherwise altered in any manner without the consent of the parties. I just wanted to clarify that party is this city council, not the appointed representative of Light Hub. I assume that's what it was, but I just wanted to clarify that.
What section are you in?
5.15. Or page 15, I believe.
It is.
If we've all got the same copy.
Oh, I see. 15. Okay.
So I would assume that would be the city, but again, I just want to. Right, so that's going to be the city council, not the appointed representative of the city council.
The signed parties on the signature page, Light Hub and American Fork City.
Right, and it has the mayor's line. I'm just clarifying that that's going to have to come back here to this body to authorize the mayor to sign that agreement.
Yes, so the city would be the party, so it would come back to this body.
Then the other item I had was in Exhibit A, the second paragraph. I know we talked a little bit about this language, and now I see it written. I just wanted to clarify. It says the city and Light Hub may negotiate. I thought that was going to be the city may negotiate, and so I didn't know if that met the intent that we had as a council last night. I wanted to ask the other council members their opinion on that. Well, the negotiations between the service providers. So we added
the
that in to
ISPs.
say that the city was going to have the opportunity to have some say in that. I don't know if that clarifies it or muddies the waters because it says and. So I don't know if that's both parties or one or the other, or I was a little confused on that section.
Let's pause right there. Tim, what do you think about that language?
As I understand the council's intent last night was that the council would like to authorize Light Hub to negotiate under certain parameters that the council would outline, so that the council would be setting the parameters and the policy, but allowing Light Hub to go and administratively negotiate with the individual ISPs and not have to come back each time. So if that's the council's intent, I would recommend the language that the city may authorize Light Hub to negotiate the parameters. So Light Hub would only do that under authorization from the city.
Hey, Camille, we got two people in agreement to that. Is there anything that you would add?
That's what we asked for.
Not the way it's written, but the way Tim had meant it,
No,
or
the
the way it's
way
written?
it's written right now, in my mind. So last night it was, Light Hub will negotiate, and we asked for the city to be put in there. The city and Light Hub may negotiate.
So my question is, who does it then? What's the trigger that allows that negotiation? Can Light Hub do it without the city?
I don't think so. Not if it's and, city and Light Hub.
But the word may is in there, so I don't know if that's.
That's may negotiate.
Okay. So that's just my question. If we're looking to clarify the language of what our intent
So we
was.
would go then back from last night's conversation to the will and may, and go back to will.
No, I think it's just that the city may negotiate the parameters of the service connection, and that we could authorize Light Hub to be able to do that on our behalf. Not as good a language as Tim had put out there, but.
Well, what I would propose then is that the city may authorize Light Hub to negotiate the parameters, so that the city would be giving Light Hub permission under these parameters to go negotiate with individual ISPs.
And that permission would come back to this body?
Not the negotiation. So once those parameters are set by the council,
Right.
Light Hub would not come back.
But when we say the city, it's not an authorized representative of the city, it's not an appointed person, it's not a department head. It is this body that gives that authorization.
That's the way it was intended last night.
Then I would put, well, it would need to come back to you then in order to establish what those parameters are.
Because the way you were saying there, the city may authorize Light Hub to negotiate, it sounds like, okay, Light Hub, go work it out. And we don't want that. They can do it, but it has to be approved by the city.
Right, so that would be, so the city may authorize Light Hub to negotiate under the parameters of service set by the city.
If you look at the definition of city,
I think that works.
I like that. As long as the definition of the city is.
Yeah,
is
what's the
fine.
definition, Kev?
Right.
the city means American Fork City, a municipal corporation, a couple of big words, and a political subdivision of the state of Utah. Doesn't reference the council or the administrator or the mayor or anybody. To me, that's just saying it's an organization. So it almost says anybody in the organization could
Well, I mean, can
One way it
I
could be interpreted.
add a line that says something about parameters set by the city council or something?
May negotiate the parameters of service. Okay, I had it a minute ago. With approval of the city
Established by the
council.
city council.
Established by the city council, that's all we need,
Yeah.
that council.
So, not opening Pandora's box, but everywhere else it says the city, what does that mean inside this agreement?
I
There's
think it
lots
means
of
exactly,
places-
exactly what it describes at the first. The city is what Kevin said.
But, okay, then who's doing
Camille,
what by when?
Camille, why don't you just come up here to the pulpit?
So the intention of this, and what I understood from last night's council meeting, was the words "may negotiate" were verbatim words from the city council, and that's why they were in there. So if I'm understanding correctly now, the city council is suggesting that Light Hub may negotiate the parameters of service by the city council? Established by the city council? I don't see a huge problem with that.
And as an interlocal, if another city comes on, they have the ability through their city and through their project to do similar things.
Right.
Okay, I just want to clarify that
Correct.
for the record.
This is only binding through American Fork
Right.
and Light Hub. So another city who contracts with Light Hub has their own ability to define the parameters as well. So American Fork can't define the parameters for another city. Each
Right.
city has to engage that. I am understanding, with respect to Councilman Shelton's complaint regarding the promissory note, if we could just return to 3.6, subparagraph C for just a second. We did have some discussion. It was my understanding that the city council wanted the promissory note removed entirely. Now, I have to tell you, the reason that was put in there was because bond counsel specifically instructed me that it needed to be part of this agreement to get and that is still the case. I'm understanding from bond counsel, Brad Patterson, that promissory note must be in here.
You know what, Brad, I didn't even see you back there. I'm going to bring you up here.
And that's an issue, so I'll
Okay.
let him address that.
You were right in my blind spot there. Could you maybe explain that, expand upon it if we need to?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm Brad Patterson. I am with the law firm of Gilmore and Bell. We are bond counsel to American Fork City. That provision needs to be in there for purposes of the pledge agreement that occurs. What happens is that in the event that there's a shortfall in revenues, then sales tax revenues and franchise tax revenues are used to make up the shortfall in that particular payment. And so what that operates as, it's a loan from the city of those franchise tax revenues and those sales tax revenues, and that the city will pay those back once there are revenues generated. So the city will be made whole once those revenues are sufficient. So that loan needs to be in the agreement.
So I thought that was covered in Part A. Maybe I just didn't understand the explanation.
It's kind of a
yesterday.
two-part
So-
process, yes.
So my biggest worry is I don't want to give a $900,000 line of credit. That's basically what we're doing. Giving
Mhm.
them, and I believe it to be an unsecured line of credit. That if that's back in there, then I'd rather have the Exhibit E put back in that actually defines the terms, because now it's even more vague than we started with.
I would agree.
And so I believe those are items that we really need to negotiate out, because I don't want, all of a sudden, we have no choice. We pass this agreement, we give that $900,000 loan to Light Hub, which
Right.
I do not like at all. I do not like pledge. I mean, that's a big percentage of our sales tax revenue that we have to keep open on an unsecured line of credit in case they ever need it. I'd rather do the bond through us. That goes into not even with this agreement at all, but I would rather just keep it straight. So that would then come back, well, anyway, that would change a lot of the language inside here. in my
Correct,
opinion.
yeah. Because that whole concept ripples throughout the document.
The other item that I,
Well, I think we need to dwell on one thing at a time and either solve it or work through it or pass it the way it is. So Brad, you've read this current version.
I have not seen the current version. It arrived on my email right when I got to the meeting, so I haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet, so.
Okay. Well, council, I guess the question to be asked is, we have concerns. We do have a motion. We have a second. Do we have a second? Yes, by Councilmember Barnes. Do we want to move this forward? Do we want to take some more time tonight, similar to work session, or are we comfortable with the way it is?
So I'm not comfortable with my motion with the way it currently sits then, because I came right from and picked up the document here on my desk. So I assume that those changes were in like we talked about last night. And if they can't be as a result of what has to be in for the bond, then no, I'm not comfortable with my motion because the document's not correct.
So are we saying we want to put the promissory note exhibit back in?
Yeah, could we just put it back in the way that it was before?
well, if we did that, there's still some concerns I have. We incentivized them to default on the loan. The loan was a default rate at 5%, and we said that they had to pay at 6%. So they're in an incentivized position to default on the loan, which makes I mean, that note would need to be reworked, in my opinion, to be one that actually would meet. If there are shortfalls, I would want to make sure Light Hub has every incentive to pay us off as soon as possible. Just like we had with the default with AF Fiber, AF Connect, we put in a 12% interest rate, right? And that was burdensome to them to have to get that paid back to us. And eventually it did get paid back to us, and we ended up winning on that. So I think it needs to be the same. I don't know, I think there's,
So we talked about putting a number and we talked about market rates. Is that,
no, your default rate's still in that line item. But again, I would want to go back through and look at that. There's other things inside here that weren't addressed at all that we had talked about last night. Stacy had brought up in the marketing item, some items there as well. So we know that, we talked about this yesterday, that there was nothing that we had to.
Wait, which one are you looking at for the marketing item? I
You bet.
thought I looked
So
at that
it's
one.
on page A-2 under Marketing Advocate Awareness Program. I'm looking at the red line version. And as you look at that second paragraph, the last sentence says the city may assist with the promotion activities as long as it receives prior written approval.
So I just have the one that was on my desk, and it just says the city may assist with the promotion activities.
Yeah, that's where we cut it off last night.
So the red line version truly isn't,
I don't know, because it's the only.
I don't even feel comfortable passing this tonight. We haven't had a chance to read it. Our legal counsel hasn't had a chance to read it. I've got a different version than everybody else got out there. This big of an item, do we really feel comfortable? I mean, it's not holding us up at all. I'd even go back and say, I, for one, am not even for wanting to go through Light Hub to bond. So for me, I feel like this is really a waste of time. I really would love to just have a vote as a council. Where are we gonna bond from?
We don't need to do that tonight.
No, I'm not saying tonight, but I'm just saying, if we're gonna keep moving forward with this, but some of us feel strongly that we're just gonna bond through the city, why are we wasting everybody's time going through this document? Now, if we don't, and there's people still wanna go through Light Hub, great, let's work through the document and see what we can do to make it as good as possible and the protections with the city in there, but that's where I kinda stand tonight.
So I want both options open anyway for me. Whether I go through Light Hub or whether the city goes ahead and bonds on its own. I feel like we've gone down the road on this. I'm a little, I'm reluctant the way it stands. So, Brad hasn't even been able to look at it. I mean, who here is comfortable? Talk me into believing that we're in the right space on this.
So, as a solution, are you proposing that we table this for tonight and bring it back in 2 weeks after we've
Talking
had?
about bringing back the promissory note.
Right.
Rob has some issues with that and those rates and that incentive. I think we all need to understand that. I don't feel like tabling it. I mean, that's why I voted to push it forward so that we could get this going and concentrate on the other things that were foremost in our mind. Like if we're going to bond through Light Hub, if we're actually going to push the whole thing forward, etc. This is the least of these, in my mind, but it has to be in place should we choose to bond through Light Hub.
And I agree with that. I just wanted to make sure. So then you're willing to take the time and go through it tonight, is what I'm asking.
We have to.
I think
It's
we
really
do to
only
stay
a
on,
promissory note.
stay on schedule, I agree.
Because I think we hashed the whole thing pretty well last night.
And the Tuesday before.
Yes, and
Yeah.
the Tuesday before.
And the Tuesday before.
Mm-hmm. So Brad, stay up that front seat. So
Brad, would you like a copy?
You want
to
my copy?
reference? And we're not going on the red line version. That is not the up-to-date version. We're going on the non-red line version.
I have no idea.
Okay. So I'll make sure.
So the red line version?
no.
I just, Stacy mentioned.
We'd
the
like
red
to
line
be able to
version
see it, so.
Is not the same.
The red
as you've
lines,
got.
if you've got the clean copy, you've got the red line. The red lines just basically showed modifications, but the language would be the same.
Just except the one part that he mentioned with the marketing.
It's the same. It's the documents that they sent us up to looking up.
The red line is not the same as what was on our desk.
It was on the desk tonight here.
The final version in hard copy.
Yeah.
Right, and there were two copies presented. This one was red line, and one was non-red line.
Red lines were also.
Sorry?
The red lines were also.
Right, but, never mind. The two copies that were on our desk, one's not the same as the other.
So, Barbara asked for red line.
So she shared her red line with me. And so we're looking over it together.
It is not the same as this clean copy. I placed it in one spot.
It's in multiple spots. Yeah. So, I don't know. We're happy to go through it, wherever you guys want to start.
Brad, can you come forward? Let's talk about putting the promissory note back in.
Sure.
What might we do to eliminate the incentive to default?
You have a variety of options available to you, including most default remedies. You can put in there that you can accelerate the note. Whether or not that has any teeth to it is a good question, because the source of revenues for the repayment would be the revenues that are generated from the system. That's one option you could pursue. Another option you could pursue would be setting a certain interest rate that gives them incentive to pay it off, because it's just, the rate is just of such a nature that it's just not tenable for them to keep their note outstanding. So there's incentive there. You could put a lien on the revenues as well, secure your own, so that you can initiate enforcement actions if need be. So those are just some of the different mechanisms that you could insert to give some teeth to the enforcement mechanism.
So Brad, one of the questions I had is, what's the terms of the loan as far as how the payment's calculated? Interest only?
No, it's interest and principal, and so
Okay.
you'd set up a schedule for the repayment of the loan.
And what's the term on that? What's the time frame?
I think that right now, I think that the loan doesn't arise until such time that the revenues are used, until the sales tax revenues are used. And so I think that because of that, you basically determine what the terms of the loan are at the time that you make the loan advance.
Well, the problem is the contract forces the loan, right?
I beg your pardon?
The contract forces the loan, right?
The contract forces the loan, yes.
So the problem is, what if we don't come to agreement on terms of the loan?
You would just that's one of the troubles that you have in leaving that particular provision open.
Right.
If you
So
want
we
to
would-
have from the time that the from the time that the obligation is incurred, you set a time of like a year, 2 years, 3 years.
So I would prefer to have that time frame already established,
Mhm.
because what I don't want to have happen is they come and say, man, we're really struggling, it's going to be 20 years, you're going to amortize this thing out. No way.
Yeah, and as the holder of the note as well, you would have the ability to extend the term of that. So you'd set like a time frame for the repayment of the note. You could put out 3, 5 years,
Right.
whatever. And in the event you look at it at that point in time, you could go ahead and waive that provision and extend it out if you need to.
And so that section 4A, I believe, could be remedied by referencing an amortization, saying it's going to be principal and interest payments amortized over, whatever we agree upon time frame, and that would get rid of the blanks and add some more clarity to the document,
Sure.
I believe. I'm on Exhibit E, 4A of the promissory note. Promissory note, Exhibit E, 4A.
Oh, A. There's a 5A.
So Kevin's is 5A, mine is 4A. We can't even have a clean, we don't have the same documents to even negotiate off of.
So would that say beginning within 2 years?
Well, that's the question.
I'm using the version that we worked on yesterday.
It doesn't say.
This is what I had.
Mine says version 6.
I got version 4.
I, wow.
It has a promissory note on it?
Does not have a promissory note on my version. It had
You know what, let's go, tell us what version we're working, I'm under the impression we all have version 4. And we're,
My understanding was that the city council received a red line version today that had all the changes that the city council requested, in addition to removing the promissory note. The city council would like me to provide a version that has that promissory note included that we've already discussed as of yesterday's work session.
so when we hear version 6, what is version 6? Is that a red line copy?
Version 6.
It's not the red line.
The red line copy came from the city of American Fork, from David Butler.
We received
Okay.
the red line copy. This is one.
My red line copy is version 3.
So
Mine says E6 down here. This is version 3.
This not make sense to table, get the same document and all work off of it.
This is a new one. This is the one that came at 5:30 p.m. This is version 4. The red line. Version 3. This one that I have is version 4. Red version. That's just an internal thing from Schmidt's office. This doesn't mean it. Yeah, that's just an internal. So you're looking at right now. That's the version 3. Yeah.
yes.
The 6 on the bottom has nothing to do with our nomenclature. That's just their nomenclature at the bottom of the page. But this has got a whole bunch. That just has a plain version. Yeah, see, this is version 6. We're on the red line version.
So I'm looking at the two documents, and there's very few places that they're different. They might have different page numbers because they moved, but the text is virtually the
Pretty
same.
much the same. It should be.
This is true. I just looked at it. There is a couple of places, but it's, other than the one spot,
Brad, you were asked to take out the promissory note. Do you believe it's, would you counsel us that it's a stronger agreement to have that exhibit in there, and why?
Yes, I believe so.
I heard not only stronger, it has to be, is what I heard you say.
Yes.
It's not even an option, it's mandatory.
To get the revenues back, to get the repayment of the advance of the franchise tax revenues and the sales tax revenues back to the city, you'll need to have it there.
What's your recommended method?
For proceeding, in terms
as
of,
far as a promissory note or some other form?
a promissory note will be fine, or a loan, however you decide you want to document that. The promissory note has been used in the past, and that it's a legally enforceable document when it's executed. So you can't go wrong with a promissory note or a loan agreement.
How might we change the language on the terms against to incentivize somebody not to default, as been noticed?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I would probably do along the lines that have been suggested, to put an amortization schedule in that says that you'll have payments of principal and interest from the time that the loan arises, have it paid back within a certain period of time.
But can you suggest those times? I mean, the very language that we might need.
It's really a hard call, and the reason I say it's a hard call is because you don't know how much you're going to be borrowing and then what the revenues are going to be and how quickly they'll be able to pay it back. And so that's part of the challenge here. And so you'd want to probably make an assumption as it relates to kind of a worst case scenario, saying you've got X amount of years to repay this loan back.
What might be X?
I will tell you I'm not a financial type, and so probably one of the financial people would have to speak to that.
Laura's coming right up behind you. Thank you.
The financial type. So, I just want to make sure it's clear, and maybe it is, but it may not be to all of your constituents. The concept of this promissory note, which I did not fully appreciate last night, so I apologize for that, is it will arise if and only if your fiber utility system revenues, as we talked about last night, that can include fiber utility fees, it could include upsell revenues, all of that is in this bucket of the fiber utility revenues. So if those are, and again, it's reasonable to assume those are not going to be zero, okay? So I can maybe give you a rough estimate on the worst case, but they aren't going to be zero, because maybe, I'm assuming at least some of you are going to sign up, right? So that probably won't be zero, right? Those revenues. So this will only trigger ever if those revenues are insufficient coming from American Fork to Light Hub through this service agreement. If those revenues are insufficient and you need to augment those with franchise and sales tax, then that would give rise to that promissory note so that they could be paid back in the future. Now that future might be when the bonds are all paid off and there's still people using the system and it will get paid back. But that's when it would arise. And again, I'm not sure that's entirely clear to everyone in the audience, may be clear to you. So I just want to let you know that. So in terms of maximum, it could be the maximum that you're pledging under sales tax and franchise fees. But again, that would assume your system revenues are zero. As you have studied the feasibility for this system, you know, there's a reasonable case, there's a worst case, a reasonable case, and a best case, which is typical in any kind of feasibility study. And you as a council know your constituents. You've heard some people tonight talk about the need for this. I've spent a lot of time in the financing of fiber space. I'm well aware of, a lot of, not just Utah, but stats in terms of how bandwidth use is just I mean, it's just skyrocketing. So you probably have a good sense of your constituents of, you know, do I think 30% are going to take the service and those, you know, higher bandwidth speeds? If you have that sense as a council, then I think you could put your reasonable expectation on what you think that number would be. Again, if it's 0, then that promissory note's going to be that full amount in franchise and sales tax. If you say, 0 is way too pessimistic, and I think, you know, talking to my kids and my neighbors and whoever, we're probably, you know, easily, if you will, hit 25 to 30%, then you would go to your feasibility study. I don't have that in front of me. You look at that feasibility study and say, oh, that means the revenues from the system would be X. That X would then get transferred to LightHub to make the debt service payment. And if that X is above the debt service payment, you're good. If that X is below the debt service payment, then that delta becomes what would constitute the loan under that promissory note. Does that make sense? Any questions based on that?
If I may, I just want to make a clarification with respect to one thing, and that is what the amounts that are payable under the service contracts are for capital costs. So basically, it goes toward the project. So these amounts would be obligated, the exact same amounts would be obligated whether or not you're bonding through LightHub. There would be the exact same amount of exposure whether or not you bond through LightHub or whether or not you bond on your own. And it would be solely for the project and not to support LightHub in any way. It would be solely for the project. These are straight pass-throughs for the bond.
Right. Biggest difference being we control our own destiny when it's with our own selves, right? We don't need to do a loan agreement with ourselves. We're already pledging those assets. Here, we're entering into some kind of a unique loan arrangement with an independent.
You're entering into a service contract for purposes of having connection services provided to you.
So the biggest difference would be if we did it on our own, there is no promissory note. We would have some organization that says, hey, we're pledging this asset that's going to back the bond, right?
There'd still be an obligation on behalf of the city.
Sure.
At the end of the day, this is still an obligation of the city, whether it's done through LightHub, whether it's done by the city on its own. It's going to be an obligation of the city, no matter what. I think the note is just there for purposes of kind of a legal nicety, if you will.
And I'm coming at this at a very tough angle because we've had a few service contracts have gone south.
Yes.
We're paying lots of thousands of dollars in legal fees to correct what wasn't addressed up front. So while it is worst case scenario, whatever that may be, it's important to be able to make sure I think we have these provisions in there. So for me, I would think a 5-year repayment schedule would be sufficient to be able to incentivize them to be able to pay back. I believe that the interest rate should be on the default side. I would like to be at 20%, but I can go as low as 15, somewhere in that range, because that's going to incentivize someone not to miss payments, right?
I know I get incentivized at 25%. So.
Will that repayment be subordinate to the bond payments? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where LightHub is short on money, right?
Once again, this is LightHub is merely a pass-through, merely a conduit for a financing for the city.
Correct.
With this contract, exactly, thank you.
And this is only on capital projects? It
Yes,
does not
this is
include
the
any
only cost that you.
operations at all?
the-
'Cause I thought-
This is on our project.
Yes.
This
Right.
is our capital improvements that we would do as a city. So what it is LightHub needs the money to pay the debt service, right? And we have to give that to them. If it's our own money going towards our own project. So if we're going to charge anyone, we're charging ourselves. This project, this money is our project money.
So when we go back to,
Brad, you can probably explain that better because it is complicated. How the city is paying LightHub, who then pays the debt service
Right.
for our own project.
Essentially, the way this particular structure would work is that the service contract itself would be pledged to bondholders for the repayment of their particular bonds. And it goes to no other purpose other than to the payment of the bonds.
So I thought that it had to do, well, maybe I got the misunderstanding, but I thought it had to do, and I was looking for the clarification in whatever document we're looking at now as to how we define what Barbara found yesterday as the revenue tax item. 'Cause I think that goes to the question, is it operational or is it capital?
Yeah, I think it's very unique the way that it's structured. The definition of revenue requirement is what is the mechanism that triggers the what is known as a shortfall, and the shortfall is the difference between what the revenues are and what is required on the debt service, or what is required under the service contract. And in the event that there's a shortfall in the revenues at that point in time, that's when the sales tax revenues and the franchise tax revenues in a certain proportion are used to repay, or you're used to pay the service contract in the event that the service revenues are insufficient.
Councilmember Shelton, if you look at the definition of light hub revenue requirement, I think that's where we made the change.
That's what I was checking on.
It used to say the sum of the capital cost and the operational cost.
And I
So
think
that
it-
was amended to be just the capital cost.
Right.
So it's just our own project. So if we charge an exorbitant interest rate, we pay that to ourselves.
I'm going to make a suggestion. What if we pass this with the addition of the promissory note, and if Rob has any changes to the promissory note that he wants from the promissory note that was given to us before? Does that make sense?
We could amend it like next time.
Maybe to note some of the provisions that you had asked for in
Yeah.
terms of the maturity schedule of repayment of 5 years and have a maximum interest rate established.
I just want to make sure that I don't have that assurity, having time to look through it, that we got. I know I saw where we changed it and said this is it. But I want to make sure everywhere that we talk about that note, it really is for only capital at that point. It's not for operation. So I want to make sure that's through the whole document, because that's the difference, right?
Right.
That's when it is our debt.
Right.
But if it's for operations, then there's issues there.
I get that.
Does the definition take care of that up front?
Yes, I believe the definition does take care of that up front.
Would that supersede throughout the contract?
Yes. Yes.
Should only have to say it once.
Correct.
At least that's what my mother always told me. That's what my mother always told me. I should only have to tell you once. So I'm going on that premise. And I think with that, I'm amenable to what Stacy has said, that we go ahead and do it with the chance to modify the promissory
Well,
or references to the promissory.
Well, once we do that, we have to go back and get Light Hub to agree to it as well, just so you know. It's a contract.
I don't think Light Hub has authorized this one yet.
Well, if we authorize it, then Light Hub signs it, then we have to come back and amend it. It's a
Well, I
contract.
thought, I was under the impression that there was a few changes you could just recommend to the promissory note, but maybe I am misunderstanding.
Sorry.
The question you have, so if we pass this, we put the promissory note back in with the designation of contract rather than operations, what else needs to be made in this document from your standpoint?
Stacy's got one copy.
Oh, yeah,
so-
right here. This one.
Mr. 3.6C, I guess I just have some questions on how that works with the junior loan provisions. I would assume, since we're paying ourselves back, I just have a hard time understanding that concept with the way it's in here, that we're loaning ourselves money, but understanding where that's
I thought we addressed that one already yesterday. Did we talk about that yesterday?
about.
The junior, the thing you're talking about just now, the junior loan provision.
So the way that it's written, this is it's junior to all other payment obligations. I would hope that it would be senior, only subject subordination to the bond. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Essentially, what you want to do is on those on the repayment of the loan to the city, that it's junior to the lien of the bonds, but it's senior to every other kind of obligation that's out there.
Because it's going to protect us if LightHub goes down, and there's still that loan out there. I would want to have that secured by.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. At the end of the day, the revenues themselves will have to be, the senior lien will have to go to the bondholders.
Right, and it says that the paying bill should be solely from service fees. I think that we ought to be able to pay it from any revenue source that comes back.
But they'd be of LightHub's revenues.
Right, but it specifically says here, the note shall be payable solely from service fees. Don't like that. You get whatever money you got to get that payment back and make that bond payment, right?
But it's us requiring that of us. That's the issue. It's us with those requirements on us.
Sure.
We have the bond obligation regardless.
Sure. So this is saying that we can only make those payments from service fees.
But it's the repayment of the service, it's the repayment of the franchise tax. It's kind of like the interfund loan is what it is.
So if we take a look at it, we get more revenue from the NOC, right? It's not coming from service fees. I say whatever revenue we want to do to pay it while we strapping ourselves.
Okay.
And even though we're paying ourselves, it's a loan to LightHub. So again, if anything happens with LightHub, I want to make sure that when those assets are liquidated out, that we are in priority position to be able to have the ability to pay off that debt.
We will have a say in LightHub as well.
Yeah. Please note comments.
Where's that provision so I can note it on my?
You bet. So it's 3.6. It's at the very end of the paragraph of section C.
Okay.
So I would recommend that then that sentence in 3.6C, such note shall be payable solely from service fees, just strike that. And that would allow the city discretion on where the revenue comes from. And then the next sentence, the city acknowledges that the loan obligation incurred by LightHub herein shall be subordinate and junior to LightHub's bond payment obligation, but senior to any other obligation.
I would use that, if they were to put that word only in there, right? That it's only subordinate to, yeah. And then in contracts, in the past, we've had a problem of identifying who is the city. In the past, we put the city or the city's designee in contracts. This doesn't contain that language in there. So again, my question is, every time it says the city, I'm not necessarily saying I want the city council to be the one micromanaging this, but I think it is important to say who is the city that's agreeing to all of these terms within the contract. Is that the mayor? Is that the city administrator? Is that George? Is that at the mayor's discretion as his designee? Who is that?
I recommend that the language the city could, it would be probably impractical to figure out under which scenarios which individual would be responsible. I think we're adequately protected with just the city. There are many administrative matters that would not come before the council.
Right.
But for the parameters, obviously those broad policy considerations would. And so I think there just needs to be that leeway within the document to just leave it as the city.
Can we put it or designee on there? Because we did have a contract where there was an employee that signed it and it bound us for a period of time. There was question if she had authority to be able to sign such document.
I would discourage the city from including designee, because to me that would mean a third party. That it's not the city itself, but we're using a contractor.
That's the same language we have in all of our code and a lot of other contracts we have. So if that's the case, we need to reassess how we're looking at defining who has authority to do what when. Okay, so the updated version already has your marketing item taken care of, right? Is what you mentioned? So we do need to put back in at 3.6C reference to the E
To Exhibit E.
item. And other than that, boy.
So noting those changes. And adding the promissory note, you already covered that in the motion. Don't want my motion? I made a motion, but there's been some change. So, then what we are saying then is upon mine, I will amend my initial motion to include the promissory note and the changes that we have just discussed. So noting those would be the removal of the language, what are those exact pages we have? 3.6 C, removing the sentence of, sorry, can't read that from here. The note shall be payable according to the terms and conditions of, solely from service fees. We're removing that. That whole sentence. In the next sentence, the city acknowledges the loan obligation incurred by Light Hub herein and subordinate and junior to Light Hub's bond payment obligations, but senior to other obligations, okay? Only to the bond payment. And then, yeah. And then we're adding the promissory note back in.
And Exhibit A.
And Exhibit A.
The city may authorize Light Hub to negotiate the parameters of the service
Yeah, that was
established
way-
by
yeah,
the city
way
council.
back when. Right. So those notes, adding the promissory note, the cleanup of Exhibit A, or the change on Exhibit A, and we are good to go.
Is that a motion?
That's an amendment to my original motion.
Okay. All right. Can you second that? Okay. All right. I'm going to call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, because I really appreciate you guys allowing me to have input and say, and so I hope it doesn't come across wrong, but I'm going to vote no on this one, just because I really feel that we need to bond directly.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, item number,
I'd like to also comment that I would much prefer a direct bond, or the direct contract when we get there, but that's not part of this tonight.
Has nothing to do with this.
That,
yeah.
in my mind, they're two separate things, and I just hope that's the understanding we all have.
I think I stated that an hour and a half ago when we started on this item, that this did not bind us in any way. If we wanted to bond directly, we can. We're just opening up all of our opportunities.
You opened with it and I closed with it, so it should be in there pretty well.
okay. Item number 13 is review and action on a right-of-way license agreement with Quest Corporation.
Mayor, I can introduce this item. Quest or CenturyLink came to the city. It's a DBA, so they're the same entity. Formerly, we used to call these franchises. Now we're just calling it a right-of-way use agreement, where if they need to lay in our right-of-way, they have to come and get a permit. This requires them to underground unless approved by the Public Works Director, and follow our code in terms of bonding and repairs.
Nothing different than what we've done with them in the past,
Correct.
other than the location.
Well, and they hadn't had one of these in the past, so that's why they came saying we'd like one so we can be operating by the book.
Appreciate all the hard work, and negotiation that took place. Felt the city had to have a strong position, and we kept that, so thank you. I do, yeah.
Mayor, I'll move to approve the right-of-way licensing agreement with the Quest Corporation.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Shelton, a second by Councilmember
Sorry.
Barnes.
Real quick, should I ask a question before I, does Quest still exist? Okay, I thought they were a different company, so.
I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 14 is review and action on a resolution to approve the 2020 Water Smart Grant application. Not very many grants do we have to have a council action to even submit for the grant, and we might not even get anything, likely won't, but we're going to go fishing for it. So,
Mayor, go ahead, Barbara.
Oh, I was just going to say, I move to approve the resolution as presented and direct staff to submit the grant application.
okay, have a motion by Councilmember Christiansen, second by Councilman Taylor. Any discussion on the motion?
So just real quick, this is gonna be used for secondary water metering. The other question I would have on that is, there was supposed to be a fund that was available from the state. Is that a separate application to this, or is this combining part of that?
I'm not sure about that one. I know this is a separate thing. This
So it
is,
had nothing to do
the
with the
Water
state
Smart,
then?
I'm pretty sure is through the Bureau of Reclamation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask if we knew when that next one was, because I want to be first in line
I'll
on
look
that.
into that. It's a good
Okay.
question.
Okay, Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor, may I ask that we go back to the service agreement? I should have brought my Mountain Dew tonight, because there was a resolution with that, and we passed the agreement, but we need to adopt the resolution that accompanied it. And in fact, Vendelin's put up the resolution on the board here. Just a technicality.
Oh, it's part of the motion we were.
Yes.
So we can just do another motion. I move to approve a resolution authorizing American Fork City to execute the communication service contract with Light Hub Communications Agency.
I have a motion by Councilmember Carroll,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
I'm only thinking, and this is a question, it says the thing, something moved. I'm just wondering if we don't need a date specifying the date of the resolution, because we're kind of get confused in some of these paperworks. I'm just,
Well, this is
that's a
resolution,
question,
though.
right.
And we haven't had that.
But it's a resolution to accept something, isn't it?
It's stated in here, you don't have a number.
It's just a question.
Yeah.
Tim?
It's fine if you want to put the date on. Do we have any other resolutions tonight? I would recommend we just allow the city recorder to attach the appropriate resolution number when she has the mayor sign it.
As usual, I didn't explain myself. I'm saying the date on the contract. The contract.
Do you want to reference Clark's motion, so we get the right, is that what your concern is getting?
Yeah, so that we get the right contract that we're.
As amended tonight.
Assuming we will do that, but
I see. So that the resolution be adopted, adopting the service agreement as presented in city council, the version with the amendments approved. And Camille, I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. Do you have any recommendation with that?
If I could just clarify. So the agreement that we have, that you provided redline, has the date on the front, September 24th, in anticipation of this very moment, so that we can identify that agreement as the one that we have talked about as the September 24th agreement. Now, it doesn't become binding until you sign it with Light Hub, and then you can put whatever date you do or do not sign with Light Hub on the agreement. But just for purposes of the title of the actual communication service contract, it is, the title of it is Communication Service Contract, September 24th, 2019. Sure, that is no problem.
It's not that,
Correct, that's exactly right.
Stacy, you
That's right.
concerned with that at all? Are you okay amending the motion to include that it was Clark's referencing?
Pass that one, or was that still part of the motion? We still on that? We passed it already, I think.
Well,
We want to fix this with the motion. I guess by plating tonight's date, it'll fix it with Clark's
That's my
motion.
suggestion.
Okay.
Okay.
But the agreement that we have tonight, the agreement that we have.
Like we've amended it, so it has
The
to
one
go,
that we have,
has to be
the
referenced
agreement
to your
we have is
motion.
through the 24th. So do we need to say the 20, I mean, after all of the changes that we've asked to take place for that?
Yeah, right. That's correct. Right. The amended agreement dated September 24th with the amendments that we've discussed here with the paragraph 3.6 and the promissory note tucked back into it.
Right.
Right. So you just reference that as the, right?
So do I need to make an amended motion to include that? Can we just,
I'm comfortable with it.
yeah.
My suggestion is it's fine. We're just, if I understood Councilmember Barnes' concern,
I guess
he
he's concerned that it doesn't get
He wanted to
with
match
another
them up.
version. Yeah, he wants
He
to
wants
marry
to
it.
match them up.
Everything plain.
And we can do that.
And it's a question more than a suggestion.
Yes, yes. I think if you just reference the contract date here in your resolution, you know, and that it'll pair up with the contract that we discussed
you.
tonight.
Thank you, and that's
Does
what
that
I'm
help?
saying, just reference that. Yes, thank you.
Do you want to reference it? Or are you comfortable with the motion then as it stands?
This is a question for you, Kevin.
Well, I think if we're all in agreement that that's going to be referenced in
I think I am. Okay, I have a motion and a second. It's okay. I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Nay.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
All right, item number 15 is review and action on award of a contract for the 2019 CDBG culinary waterline replacement project Phase 8 to Trapp Construction LLC. We've been very fortunate through the CDBG program. We were a little limited this year because the LMI jumped, but we were able to secure $147,000. I think the other cities are on to us. It's going to get harder next year. Mayor, Fugel, he says, you guys got a good gig going. I said, we're the only ones that are putting in for it. So,
Did you tell me didn't qualify?
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the bid submitted by Trapp Construction LLC for the construction of a 2019 CDBG culinary waterline replacement project, Phase 8, in the amount of $274,426.50, and approve the contract as presented.
Motion by Councilmember Taylor,
Second.
second by Councilmember Christiansen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 16, review and action on an ordinance amending 17.4.604 of the city code relating to the transit-oriented development table 4A operational overlay.
Mr. Mayor, I figured it'd be worth me just briefly stating what this item is before you. As I mentioned earlier, the operational overlay is something that is a part of the TOD code, but in many ways is and was, I believe, intended to be a living document. And so if you look at the original operational overlay, it was some very perfect little square lines and blocks. But as we all know, there's been significant development come in. And so really with every framework plan that I'm trying to remember the exact term. It's getting late, I'm sorry. District framework plan, thank you. That has been approved. It really should be updated. We've not done that. Something that this would probably be something that we bring before you from time to time. So what this drawing before you does tonight is it takes everyone that has been approved and shows what has been approved is on there in the right place. It also shows, we added the lines that are the black lines to show you what has been proposed but is not yet approved. Those are things that are going through review phases right now. And we thought it would be of benefit to show what has been proposed by the developers. And as you can see, there is the beginnings of a pretty good grid network. In particular, if you look even at the one that was approved tonight, you can see how it can be and is intended that it would be a part of a grid system. With you look at how that road would extend further to the west. So again, the first of probably several that we'll routinely bring before you.
I don't know if I'm looking at this right, but the black line on, what is that? Just above 350 South. I'm not sure what that would be. It's just slightly above the red line. Does that concerning at all?
No, yes, you see it doesn't exactly overlap.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things that I think is, as we see the original operational overlay, it was laid out with some squares with absolutely no regard to actual property lines. So when you get out kind of in the real world, one of the things that we look for before we bring something to you is, does it generally fit with the spirit of the idea of connectivity? Sure. And sometimes this changes, where a developer may propose that it works better for them to go right on a property line, and that may be 20 feet off of what the original plan was, but it makes sense. Totally fine, yeah. It makes sense. And in fact, if you look at one of the north-south roads, you can see the developer's proposing, I believe, 1100 west. You can see that there's a little bit of a chicane in that, and that's what they're proposing.
Well, I guess my question is, there's not another road right next to it, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's a very good question. I'm sorry. We probably should have clarified that. So the black are just proposals. Those have not been approved by the city council or anyone, but we wanted to show you what, and to have on the document what has been proposed.
And you also were looking for an opportunity to say chicane.
I just love that word, chicanery, and all those.
I remember that from back when we were discussing this.
It's chicane,
Yeah.
it is.
So some of us need a definition of that French word, if you would, please.
It looks like French drain.
Curvy line.
It's a curve, a bend, a slight meander.
Slight meanders.
None of us are even actually aware of whether or not he used a correct preference.
You'll have to Google it.
Trickery
Yeah.
to achieve a political, financial, or legal purpose.
Oh dear. Okay. Well,
I
chicane, not
always-
chicanery.
I
That
always
is an
thought
alternate
chicanery was,
definition. That's chicanery,
something
but I said
bad.
chicane. So please keep looking. Please keep looking. It's a meander. So. But anyway, you can see that when developers do come in, they propose those things. We'll look at them, and if they generally fit the spirit of the plan and the connectivity, we will bring it forward to you with a positive recommendation for approval.
Mayor, I move to adopt the ordinance amending the section 17.4.608 paren 408 close paren table 4A operational overlays of the American Fork City Municipal Code.
I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
I like that. I mean, we're talking open fields, and I think we're doing a real good thing here. So, okay, item number 17, review and action on an ordinance creating section 15.01.1417 of the city code relating to the detail for placement of 1.5 and a 2-inch pressurized irrigation meter.
Mr. Mayor, Council, really briefly on this one, when the Council adopted the ordinance back in March, I believe it was, to have all new meters, all new PI connections be metered. We did not have a detail at the time that showed for these larger 1.5-inch and 2-inch connections how it needed to be installed so that we could get in, operate it, maintain it, and do those things. It was just the smaller ones, and so we really were able over the last couple of months to see a need for this, and so created a detail that we feel works and works well, talked extensively with the guys who actually will have to maintain it, and we recommend approval of this detail.
Probably see these at large commercial buildings, things like that.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the ordinance approving section 15.01.1417 relating to the 1.5 and 2.5 inch pressurized irrigation meter placement.
Have a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
Second.
second by Councilmember Christiansen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes, Councilmember Taylor, or Carroll?
Aye.
Through the curveball. Councilmember Taylor? Okay.
Aye, sorry.
Okay. All right. Item number 18. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Got a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
Second.
second by Councilmember Shelton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.
So for anybody that cares, that last page is number 220.